All right, so this is chapter 14. I'm just going to go through the different chapters with you, section by section. So we'll just do 14.1 right now. And then possibly tomorrow, 14.2, sort of not to overwhelm you, but to get through this so we can get through everything before the end of the school year. All right, so this is the first start or the first part of Unit B on reproduction and development. So, Chapter 14, it coincides with the booklets that you guys got. It's on the continuance of human life. So, this part is all about reproduction. The overview for this unit, it says oxytocin, prolactin, HGH, FSH, and LH play prominent roles in the development of reproductive organs as well as development of new human life. This is a picture of the different hormones, and this is the hormones that are secreted by the different endocrine glands. So we're sort of connecting to the last chapter, and we've looked at all of these, some more than others. We haven't necessarily looked at the ovaries and testes, but that's where we're going to go here. So we're going to focus on estrogen, progesterone, and testosterone and what those things do. If we review back to the endocrine glands that we looked at in the last chapter, remember that all hormones are released from the hypothalamus to the anterior or posterior pituitary gland, and then from there to their target organs. So if we're looking at the anterior, it can release FSH and LH, which is going to become important in this chapter. Our human growth hormone, which we've already discussed a little bit. Prolactin, which we'll talk about in this chapter and the next as well. The ACTH, which is the adrenocorticotropic hormone, which has to do with our fight or flight and stress response. And then the last one here is the thyroid stimulating hormone, which stimulates the thyroid to release thyroxine, which can affect your metabolism. On our posterior pituitary gland, we've got oxytocin. So oxytocin is released to the mammary glands. So if we look at that compared to prolactin, we're going to be talking a little bit about that in this chapter. Oxytocin can also be released to stimulate the uterine muscles. So this normally has to do with going into labor, which we'll talk about in this chapter. And then the final one is the ADH, which is your antidiuretic hormone, or your kidneys. So we talked a little bit about that and how we can sort of release more fluids from ourselves or keep fluids in depending on our blood pressure and stuff like that. Okay, so that's sort of a review of all of those different endocrine glands. But we're going to be focusing on this one, this one, this one, and this one. In this chapter, at least. So chapter 14 overview, it says, contact between sperm and egg is a central event of human production. Production processes in two different individuals join together to create the single cell that will develop over a period of 9 months into a new human being. While most mammals can produce more young than humans can, humans are among the few species able to mate and produce young at any time of the year. So if we think about other species, I'm going to say deer, for instance, they have a mating season where humans, we can mate at any time of the year. We don't have to mate in the spring, which is what many species do. If we think about non-animal species, certain flowers, plants, they also mate in the spring. So spring is like that new beginning time in many of the lives of different species, but in humans, we can really just reproduce whenever. This ability helps to make human populations very mobile and adaptable to new surroundings. So we don't have to wait for a certain time of year. We don't have to, wait. If any sort of situation happens in the world, we can reproduce where some species would have to wait like a whole year. So this launch lab, I'm not even positive, sorry, that you have to do this. So I'm going to skip this. I'll look back at it after. The vocabulary for this section, so there's quite a bit of vocabulary in this chapter 14.1. We're going to be going through basically all of the anatomy. So there's a lot of words to remember, but it would be a good idea to sort of study or look over the diagrams, which we'll go through, and I can post them on the Google Classroom. So the male and female reproductive systems. The human reproductive system is adapted to unite a single reproductive cell from a female parent with a single reproductive cell from a male parent. To achieve this outcome, the male and female reproductive system have very different structures and functions. There are many features in common, but both systems include a pair of gonads. So gonads is our testes or our ovaries. So those are the things that are going to create those sex cells, the cells that are going to unite together to create a new human being. Which are the organs that produce the reproductive cells? I guess that's what it's just saying. So the sperm and the egg, which are called gametes. So the word gametes, that's a possibly new word to you. That's the scientific word, I guess, for our sex cells, our sperm and our egg. So those sperm and egg have to come together, those two gametes, to create a zygote, which we'll get to probably a little later. The gonads produce sex hormones. So our gonads are those parts of our private parts, I guess you could say, or the ones that are producing the sex cells. So if we go back, I think that's, did I skip over that? Did it say what gonads were here? Maybe it didn't. Oh, pair of gonads. So testes and our ovaries. So those are our gonads. So they're the ones that produce the sex hormones, which are the chemical compounds that control the development and function of the reproductive system. Human reproductive system includes internal and external sex organs, as well as ducts and glands that play a role in forming the transporting gametes. So if we're looking at the reproductive system, the main point of it all is that these sex cells are created, transported, and able to get to each other. That's really the point of life, if we think of an evolutionary perspective, is that you reproduce. I know that's not our main goal in life, but if we're thinking about it in an evolutionary perspective, it is to pass our genes on to the next generation. The structures, like organs, ducts, and glands, that play a direct role in reproductive are called the primary sex characteristics. So if we think about primary, those are those things that are their main or directly related to creating and reproduction, I guess. Males and females also have distinct set of features that are not directly related, and these are called secondary sex characteristics. It doesn't say here what they are. I think it's going to in the next slide. But if we think about secondary sex characteristics, these are things that you can normally see, I guess, in puberty. So when someone goes through puberty, some of the things that happen, if you're a male, you might start growing facial hair, you might have wider set shoulders, you may have an Adam's apple, a deeper voice. Those are all secondary things. So they're things that are not directly related to reproduction, but they're a byproduct of, in a male, creating more testosterone. And then in a female, you would see like breasts, widening of the hips, I guess hair on the body, same as males. But those are all things that are they're created by our sex hormones, but they're not directly related to, I guess, reproduction. In human society, sexual relationships serve a range of social and emotional functions. You'll examine how the male and female reproductive systems are adapted to the biological functions of creating and supporting a human embryo. Oh, here we go. So this is, if we look at this chart, it's a great chart. I love charts. This is the first one is the male. So the primary sex characteristics are the gonads, the scrotum, the epididymis, and the ductus deferens. Sometimes ductus deferens is the, I guess, the English way of saying that word. Now I'm like, oh, it was escaping my mind of what the American way. The American is the vas deferens. So if you see online, if you look up like different pictures of this or diagrams, you might see the word vas deferens. Ductus deferens is like the English Canadian way of saying it. And then there's also the penis, the seminal vesicles, the prostate, and the Cowper's gland. So we're going to get to all those, but those are all the main things that help us to create, I guess, or bring the sperm out of the male. The secondary sex characteristics, facial hair, body hair, deeper voice, broader shoulders, narrower hips, and the more obvious muscle development compared to females. So males tend to get more muscle, stuff like that during puberty, and that's all due to the testosterone, which we'll get to later on. The female, the primary sex characteristics, so these are all the things that are directly related to creating that baby or bringing out that egg, is the gonads or the ovaries, the oviducts. Oviducts is also a British word. The American word for oviducts is fallopian tubes. I don't know why they have different words, so you might see fallopian tubes elsewhere. The uterus, the cervix, the vagina, and the vulva. So those are all in the primary sex characteristics. If we look at the secondary sex characteristics of a female, we've got minimal facial hair. So there might be some facial hair, but very minimal. Minimal body hair, prominent breasts compared to males. So women have breasts, males they do, but not to the same extent. A higher voice, a more rounded shoulders, wider hips, and less obvious muscle development. So compared to males, they're gaining a lot more hair, muscle development, where we're not so much. So if we're looking at the male reproductive system in particular, it says the male reproductive system includes organs that produce and store a large number of sperm cells and organs that help to deposit these sperm cells within the female reproductive tract. Some of the male reproductive structures are located outside the body and others are located inside. So these are all of the male reproductive organs. Testes, probably one of the most important ones, are where they produce the sperm and the sex hormones. So the testes produce sperm, but they also produce testosterone. And if you look at testes, testosterone comes from that word. The epididymis is where the sperm, I guess, mature and store and develop, I guess. So during their developmental stage, they're stored in the epididymis, and we'll see that on a diagram in a little bit. Actually, the next slide. The ductus deferentia or deferentius is where they conduct and store sperm. So that's also the vas deferens. That's where sperm basically flow through to get out of the male. The seminal vesicle, this is something that helps to create semen. So sperm are within semen, and semen is basically that fluid that allows the sperm to swim. So there's 3 different things that add to the semen, and that's the seminal vesicles, the prostate, and the Cowper's. So these 3 glands will help to give fluid to the sperm. So the seminal vesicle, what it does is it gives it fructose. And I don't know if you guys remember back to Bio 20 when we talked about the digestive system, but fructose is one of the major sugars. So fructose is a sugar from fruit, but the seminal vesicle will actually contribute fructose to the semen, and this gives it some energy. So the semen have like that energy to be able to make their long journey to where they want to be. The prostate gland contributes alkaline and mucoid fluids to the semen. So it sort of gives alkaline, we can think of as like salts. So it gives us mucousy salt, as well as the Cowper's gland does the same thing. So they're adding to the fluid to help sort of give the sperm a chance to be able to swim through towards the vagina, into the uterus. The urethra, that is where the semen goes through, but this is also where the urine comes through as well. So if we think about males, they have that one tube that allows the semen to go through, but also their pee, and that all is emptied out through the penis. And then the penis is what carries the semen into the female reproductive tract. So that's that main purpose of that, is to be able to deposit the sperm or the semen into the female's reproductive tract. So let's look at this. This is the anatomy of it. I'll sort of show you how we follow this through. So let me start. So if we start at the testes, this is the testes. This is where the sperm would be created. And then once it's done being created, it's stored inside of this. So this little red part, that's known as the epididymis, and it's stored there to mature, get ready for when it's ready to leave the male. So it's maturing here, great. Then when it's ready to leave, the sperm will leave the epididymis and follow this tube. This tube is known as the ductus deferens or vas deferens. It goes all the way over here. When it gets over to here, we can see this gland, which is called the seminal vesicle. That's the thing that's going to release the sugars. So it's going to give the sugar to the semen to give it extra energy. Once it's got that energy, it's going to continue. This is the ejaculatory duct, so it's giving it that extra boost to get it out of the penis. And then the prostate gland, which is right here, is going to add some fluids, and it's going to continue down here. The Cowper's gland is the last one that's going to add fluid. Then it's going to go through this, which is the urethra, all the way down out of the penis. And then that is the journey of the sperm. So there's lots of other words here that I might not have gone over. The scrotum, that's sort of that protection over top of the testes. This is showing the large intestine. So this is showing would be the rectum, that area. So not really important to this, but also the bladder. So it's showing where it is in comparison to all of this. So the bladder right here is just connected right to the urethra, so pee can go out right like that. The semen has to go all the way through this and then down through there. Okay. And then I think I got the rest of them. This is just the sort of outer anatomy of the penis, but not too important to this. So the testes, it says the two male gonads, the testes, are held outside the body in a pouch of skin called the scrotum. The scrotum regulates the temperature of the testes, since sperm production is most successful at temperatures around 35 degrees Celsius, which is a few degrees cooler than normal body temperature. In cold conditions, the scrotum draws close to the body, so the testicles stay warmer. In hot conditions, the scrotum holds the testes more loosely, allowing them to remain cooler than the body. So I don't know if you've ever heard of this, but they'll say that the different types of underwear that guys wear can affect their sperm count. And this is totally true on how basically close their testes are to their body. The testes need to stay a little bit cooler. So if people are wearing really tight underwear, then they can keep their testes closer to their body, and that can affect their sperm count. So the looser, the better, to allow the testes to stay cooler and to allow the sperm to stay at the temperature that they need. The testes are composed of long, coiled tubules called seminiferous tubes and hormone-secreting cells called the interstitial cells that lie between the seminiferous tubules. I think it's hopefully going to show you a picture of that. Maybe not. I'm going to skip to where it shows a picture of that. So if we look inside of the testes, it actually looks like this, which is sort of looks kind of gross to me, but anyway. So this is the scrotum, the outside part. The testes is right here, and right inside of the testes is a whole bunch of little tiny tubes, and all within there is where the sperm is being created. So it's being created all through here. Once it's created, it can go through this little matrix here to the epididymis, and the epididymis is going to be where it's going to mature. So the interstitial cells secrete the male hormone testosterone, and the seminiferous tubules are where sperm's produced. Each testis contains more than 215 meters of seminiferous tubules, and can produce more than 100,000 or 100 million. Don't know why I said 1,000 sperm each day. A mature sperm is a tadpole-shaped structure of about 0.06 millimeters long. Each sperm cell has 3 parts: an oval head, a cylindrical middle piece, and an extended tail. So if we look back at this diagram, we can see the picture of a sperm. This is what a sperm might look like, and this sort of head on it is sort of like a spear to be able to go into the egg when it gets to it. And then this tail, really important because it's going to help it to swim. And it's going to swim in that semen, which is going to be released by, or given to the sperm by all of these ducts. So remember these 3 ducts that add the fluid. That's really important so that the sperm can actually swim. One second. Okay. So the head contains a nucleus with 23 chromosomes, and it's covered by a cap-like structure. So that head part, although it's like a spear, it also is holding the chromosomes. And every person has 46 chromosomes, so 23 of them are coming from the dad and 23 from the mom. So those 23 chromosomes, they're in that cap-like structured head. They call it the acrosome. So the acrosome stores enzymes that are needed to penetrate the productive layer, or the protective layer, surrounding the female egg. The middle piece contains the mitochondria, which produce energy from the movement of the tail. The tail propels the sperm with a lashing motion, and sperm can move at about 3 millimeters per hour. So it doesn't seem like it's very fast, but it's enough for the size of it, if we think about it. Developing sperm are supported and nourished by the Sertoli cells, which are also located in the seminiferous tubules. So, if we look at this diagram, which is inside of basically here, so it's like a really zoomed in picture of this, we see Sertoli cells. So Sertoli cells are those cells that nourish the sperm as it's being created. Each testis sperm, or from each testis testes, sperm are transported to a nearby duct called the epididymis. Within each epididymis, the sperm mature and become motile. The epididymis is connected to a storage duct called the ductus deferens, which leads to the penis via the ejaculatory duct. The ductus deferens is also known as the vas deferens. So that's what I told you earlier. That's that American way of saying it. This is the British. So again, close-up version of what the testy looks like. Then this is like it under a microscope. Within that those white areas, you can see those are Sertoli cells, and those are what are going to nourish these developing sperm. Once they're developed, they can go into the ductus deferens to be able to do what they're meant to be. Okay, so the penis is the male organ for sexual intercourse. Its primary reproductive function is to transfer sperm from the male to the female. The penis has a variable length shaft with an enlarged tip called the glans penis. A sheath of foreskin surrounds and protects the glans penis. The foreskin does not have any reproductive function, so there's no reason for the foreskin, but it protects, I guess, that area. During sexual arousal, the flow of blood increases to specialized erectile tissues in the penis. This causes the erectile tissues to expand, and at the same time, the veins that carry blood away from the penis become compressed. So normally, there's blood flow going to the penis all the time, but the blood flow is, flowing. It's going to the penis and away from the penis. But in the case of sexual arousal, the veins will close off, and the blood will just keep flowing there. So that allows a lot of blood to sort of stay in that area and allows for an erection to happen. So it says, as a result, the penis engorges with blood and becomes erect. Sperm cells move out of the epididymis through the ductus deferens. So all that sperm that's being, getting ready to swim, it goes through the ductus deferens and towards out of the penis. As a sperm cell passes through the ductus deferentia, they are mixed with fluids from a series of glands. The seminal vesicles produces a mucus-like fluid that contains the sugar fructose, which provides energy for the sperm. The prostate gland and Cowper's gland also secrete mucus-like fluids and an alkaline fluid to neutralize the acids from urine in the urethra. So if we think back to pH, the urine is very, very acidic. So this Cowper's gland will secrete a mucus that's a fluid that has really basic to sort of neutralize it. Because imagine going through the penis and going through like a really acidic area. It needs to be able to neutralize it so that the sperm don't die. Also, those fluids are really important when the sperm gets into the female because the vagina is a very acidic area as well. So it helps to sort of neutralize that so the sperm can make it into the female's reproductive tract. So this culmination is all called semen, and if sexual arousal continues, semen enters the urethra from the ductus deferentia. So if they continue to be sexually aroused, then it'll finally move from here and out. So the urethra is the duct that carries fluid through the penis. The urethra is shared with the urinary and reproductive system. The movement of semen is the result of a series of interactions between the sympathetic, parasympathetic, and somatic nervous system. So there's a lot of things going on here to make this happen. There needs to be that arousal, which would be from your sympathetic nervous system, but also your parasympathetic is balancing that, because this shouldn't be something that's scary. It should be a arousal that is somewhat calming. So that's the parasympathetic. And then the somatic nervous system as well, so that feeling of it. Sensory stimulation, arousal, and coordinated muscular contractions combined to trigger and release the semen from the penis. This is ejaculation. The semen is then deposited into the vagina. So now we're going to look at the female reproductive system. So the female reproductive system does not mass produce large numbers of gametes. Remember, males produced 100 million sperm a day, where a female does not create that much at all. The two female gonads, the ovaries, so we have two ovaries, produce only a limited number of gametes. The female gametes are called eggs, or ova or ovum. Other female sexual organs are adapted to provide a safe environment for fertilization, for supporting and nourishing developing fetus, and for allowing the birth of a baby. Most of the structures of the female reproductive system are located inside the body. So these are the functions of the female reproductive system. Reproduction. I'm going to say reproductive. So these are all of them. We got ovaries, which are the ones that produce the eggs, but also the estrogen and progesterone are sex hormones. The fimbriae, which are the ones that sweep the egg into the oviduct. So they're the ones that help to move the egg out of the ovaries. The oviducts are the fallopian tubes. Those are the ones that connect your ovaries to your uterus. This is normally where fertilization occurs. So this is where the sperm need to make it to in order to reach the egg. The uterus, which is where the developing fetus is housed. So that's where the baby's going to be developed, not created. It's going to be created in the oviducts. The cervix is where the opening is to the uterus. And then the vagina is the thing that's going to receive the penis during intercourse and serves as the birth canal, as so where the baby's going to come out, as well as the exit for menstrual flow. All great things. Okay, so this is the female reproductive system. So if we look at, start like how I did in the male, so this is the ovary, and the ovary is going to be where the egg or the ovum is created. It's going to be swept out. This is the fimbriae. It's going to sweep out, or sort of be like a vacuum to pull the egg out. It's going to go down the oviduct, or the fallopian tube, into the uterus. Look how muscular that uterus is. The walls are so muscular, so it can sort of have a lot of contraction. It can have a lot of stretch, I guess. And that's where the baby's going to develop. So in that uterus is going to be where it develops. But I need to go back to over here. So in the ovary, that release of the ovum down the oviduct, the sperm is going to have to meet the egg somewhere in here. So from the time that this is released to the time it gets here, the sperm needs to make it all the way up here through the uterus and up into here to meet the egg. If it doesn't meet it at that point, then it won't be able to be fertilized. So females, in a sense, sort of like other species, have only really a small window of time where they can actually reproduce, or they can actually get pregnant. But anyway, we'll talk about it a bit later. So this is the uterus, and then at the very opening is the cervix. So that's that muscle that keeps the uterus from, opening up. And then we've got the vagina, and that's that big opening there. And then at the very bottom, there's the different parts, but basically this is the opening to the vagina. This is the rectum, and this is our bladder. So females have an opening for the baby, an opening for urine, and for poop, basically. So if we think about it, we're a little bit different than males because we have these two different openings. This is our reproductive opening. This is the urine opening, where males, their pee and their sperm come out of the same tube. Not the case for females. So yeah, that's the urethra right there. This is the bladder. Is there anything else? This is the clitoris. This is sort of the sexual stimulation area. These are just sort of the types of skin that's around the vagina, but that's basically it. So it's going to explain all of these a little bit in more detail. It's quite a bit. Sorry I have to talk so much. You don't have to watch this all at once. The ovaries. So the two ovaries are suspended by ligaments within the abdominal cavity. The ovaries are the site of oogenesis. So oogenesis is the production of an egg. Ova are also called oocytes. The ovaries usually alternate so that only one produces an egg each month. So every month you're going to produce an egg, and it'll alternate between sides. So one month it's the left side, then the next month the right side. And you might feel maybe pain in that area. Like pain on the right side one month and then the left side the next month. And that may have a lot to do with which side is producing the egg. The ovary contains specialized cell structures called follicles, and a single ovum develops within each follicle. Each month, a single follicle matures and then ruptures, releasing the ovum into the oviduct. This event is called ovulation. So ovulation only happens on the 14th day of the cycle. We have 28-day cycle, just like the moon cycle. This event of ovulation happens, roughly around the halfway point, and that's when the release of the egg will happen. The fimbriae, which are those thread-like projections, they're the ones that sweep over the ovary to help move the ovum out. It helps to move it about 10 centimeters long, called the oviduct. It's swept by the fimbriae into the ciliated. Okay, so the oviducts are only about 10 centimeters long, where that's where the egg will go out into. The oviduct carries the ovum from the ovary to the uterus, and within the oviduct, the beating cilia, so those little hair-like things, help to move the ovum toward the uterus. A mature ovum is a non-motile sphere-shaped cell, approximately 0.1 millimeters in diameter. So eggs are way bigger than sperm. Remember, sperm are 0.06 millimeters in diameter. But eggs do not move. They don't have a tail or anything to move. So they rely specifically on the little cilia in the oviduct to help move it along the path. The ovum contains a large quantity of cytoplasm, which contains nutrients for the first days of development after fertilization. The ovum is encased in a thick membrane, which must be penetrated by a sperm cell before fertilization can take place. The uterus is a muscular organ that holds and nourishes a developing fetus. The uterus is normally about the size and shape of a pear, but is expanded to many times its size as the fetus develops. The lining of the uterus, called the endometrium, is richly supplied with blood vessels to produce nutrients for the fetus. At its upper end, the uterus connects to the oviducts. At its base, the uterus forms a narrow opening called the cervix. The cervix connects to the vagina, and then the vagina serves as an entrance for the penis to deposit sperm. The vagina also serves as an exit for the fetus during childbirth. The ovum survives in the oviduct for up to 24 hours after ovulation. If a living egg encounters a sperm in the oviduct, fertilization may take place. So I'm just going to go back to here just to explain that a little bit more. So once this fimbriae releases the egg down here, this is 10 centimeters long, so not very long. The egg has to be moved by cilia, so it takes quite a long time to get there. Roughly 24 hours, so they say. I've heard up to possibly 3 days is the maximum, 2 to 3 days, that you could actually get pregnant. But this is the only time that the sperm can come into the the oviduct to get to the egg. So only that 24-hour to 48-hour period is when it needs to be fertilized. The fertilized egg, so if it is fertilized, is now called the zygote and continues to move through the oviduct for several days before reaching the uterus. So yeah, about a couple days, 3 days max, I think. And during this time, the endometrium thickens as it prepares to receive the zygote. So once the sperm is able to fertilize the egg, the uterus is going to start to thicken its wall and get ready for the zygote to implant in the wall there. The zygote will implant itself in the endometrium and development of the embryo begins. If the egg is not fertilized, it does not implant in the endometrium. The endometrium One second. I don't know how to stop this. What the frig? Cat's doing dumb things. Sorry about that. So the endometrium disintegrates and its tissues and blood flow out the vagina in a process called menstruation. So if you do not have an egg that's fertilized in your... oh my god, cats. If you don't have an egg that's fertilized, it doesn't implant in the endometrium, and then every month you will sort of get rid of the walls of your uterus, and that will be shed by menstruation. The vagina opens up into the external genitalia organs, known together as the vulva. The vulva includes the labia majora and the labia minora, which are two parts of skin folds that protect the vaginal opening. So the part of the skin that sort of protects that opening is called the labia. And then the vulva also includes the glans clitoris, which becomes erect during sexual arousal. So just like a male who has sort of that blood flow to the penis, in which the veins sort of shut down so that the blood continues to pool there, that's what happens to a female during arousal as well. So just as the same as a penis, the clitoris is that part that'll sort of keep that blood flow to it for sexual arousal. So if we compare the very last slide here, comparing the cells, the sperm and the egg. Sperm much smaller than egg. Sperm has energy. Eggs don't have any. They just are moved through the oviduct from the cilia, and then once they get to the uterus, the endometrium gives them energy. The mitochondria is what produces, or how much mitochondria does a sperm have? 50 to 100 mitochondria. The cytoplasm of an egg has 140,000 mitochondria, so a lot more. In a lifetime, a male can produce 300 to 500 million sperm each day. So that's a lot of sperm each day in a male's lifetime. Notice that a male can produce sperm forever, so males are always able to reproduce. where each ovary contains 300 to 400,000 eggs at puberty, and one is released each month. So at puberty, that's when you've got all the eggs that you have for your lifetime, basically, and each month one will be sort of matured and released. Sperm are motile where eggs are not, so they don't move. And then the outer structure of the sperm has that sort of enzyme head where the outside of an egg has a thick coating that the sperm has to sort of make its way through. So that's why it uses this enzyme to be able to break down the core into the core. So that is that first section. That is quite a bit, I realize. But that is all of the anatomy of the reproductive system. And I'm not 100% sure how to shut this down because I've lost the... This is me learning. I might need to cut this.